Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Settlements Refresher Training for DAME, EDAM, and the EDAM CAISO Balancing Authority Participation Rules. So we've given a couple of trainings up to this point, but we're reaching the finish line, about ready to go live with EDAM and DAME and the EDAM CAISO Balancing Authority PR. And so we're doing this refresher training to kind of make sure that people are getting up to speed, you know where to find information, and you're feeling more comfortable about where you're at with EDAM. So my name is Heidi Carter. I'm one of the lead customer education trainers here at the ISO in the customer readiness team. With me is Bo Beljean. He's our producer for today, so he's going to be keeping an eye on the chat and also your hands and helping to keep us on time as well. So thank you for being here. So a little bit of housekeeping here. You'll probably hear us every once in a while. If you maybe come off of mute, we'll put you back on mute. But that doesn't mean you have to stay muted the whole time. We do ask that you remain muted while the presentation's going on to minimize any background noise. But please raise your hand if you do have questions along the way. We'll be stopping at points to answer questions. We also will be keeping an eye on the chat and making sure that we get your questions answered, and we'll do our best to answer those in class. We do have some subject matter experts with us, which we're very grateful for, and so they will be chiming in with any like deeper dive questions. But we also, kind of have a limited staff because they're busy working, getting ready for EDAM. So sounds like I've got, all right. Got somebody unmuted. I'm going to go ahead and mute you real quick. All right. So thanks for that example. So we've got that on the back end that we'll keep an eye on, so that if you do get muted, we are unmuted by accident, we will mute you so we don't hear anything you don't want us to hear. But definitely please ask questions during the class. We will be collecting all the questions and answers from class, those that we answer and those that we maybe have to take back and do a little bit more research. And we will collect all of those, put those into a Q&A just a document, and that will be posted on the the training center along with the presentation and a recording within 3 business days of this training. So stay tuned, that will be available on our training center. So just real quick, just to kind of set the stage on some of the roles that you're going to be hearing. You've probably heard these throughout, but sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. An EDAM entity, also referred to as an EESC, an EDAM entity scheduling coordinator. It is a balancing authority that participates in EDAM market. So this also includes the California ISO because we are a balancing authority as well. EDAM entities are going to provide inputs like market limits, outages, transmission constraints, et cetera, for their particular area. And the entities can also be an SC, a scheduling coordinator, that's representing loads and resources within their balancing authority area, should they hold such responsibilities. We also have the market operator or real-time market operator. That's a separate role that's within the ISO. Those of you that participate in the Western Energy Imbalance Market, WEIM, dealt with those folks. They're great group. The market operator, that's a separate role. They're staffed by personnel that are dedicated to equal and independent operation of both regional markets, and they are already doing that.
I'll see how that works.
Oh, sounds like we've got somebody off of mute. And so they will also fill this role for EDAM as well. So they've been coming up to speed. They have a lot of knowledge. So they're going to be ready to support those organizations that are joining EDAM. The scheduling coordinator or SC role, that's a certified entity that participates in the market by submitting bids and outages and managing the coordinated operation of its facilities. So that is the team or the group that can work with the ISO, gets access to our resources, to the ISO's applications, et cetera. And so you might not be a scheduling coordinator, but you might be under a scheduling coordinator. Maybe you're a resource owner. So just kind of, again, setting the theme for some of these terms. And then there's a transmission customer, SC. So the transmission customer scheduling coordinator, they submit and manage transmission service schedules on behalf of a transmission customer for transactions that are associated with EDAM participation. So the output from the day-ahead timeframe and for EDAM is reviewed and implemented in real time, and then there's still that opportunity to make any kind of necessary adjustments. So a little level setting on some of the terms. But for this class in particular, who's the primary audience? We're looking at the scheduling coordinators within the ISO balancing authority area. So that could be our, PG&E, Southern Cal Edison, et cetera, and other scheduling coordinators. And then you've got EDAM scheduling coordinators, so the entities that are going to be joining, that are maybe considering joining, and stakeholders that are engaged in the Western energy markets who just want to stay informed. In this class, you're going to be able to identify and navigate key informational resources used to support the interpretation of updated and newly introduced settlement charge codes. Interpret a settlement charge code by analyzing the details provided in the configuration guide. So we're going to go through it. We're going to look at its purpose, input, settlement application. And then we'll go through EDAM settlements that are related to imbalance reserve tier 1 and 2 for imbalance reserve, and then also reliability capacity, and then imbalance reserve portion of the FRP, the flexible ramp product. We'll also talk about the RSC, the resource sufficiency evaluation settlements, and then we'll talk about the key settlement timelines. So this is going to be a much higher level class because we have realized that there are a lot of new folks that are joining the ISO as scheduling coordinators. So we're going to kind of set some of the fundamentals. Some of you that have been participating heavily in a lot of the trainings that we've had, the meetings, the market sim meetings, and the different, if you're an onboarding entity, maybe some track meetings, different customer meetings, you'll probably have a much deeper dive. So we just want to set some expectations that this is more on the fundamentals. And so you can kind of set some of those expectations.
Hey, Heidi, real quick, we got a hand raised from Paul Haas at SEL. Paul,
Hi,
if you
Paul.
would like to come off mute.
Hi, Heidi.
Hi, Paul.
Just a question for the kind of the level setting. So for the transmission scheduling coordinators, we could be involved in EDAM through that, even if we are not, on track at this time to become a direct EDAM participant, but we may be brought in through the scheduling of transmission resources. Is that correct?
That's correct. So there, could, even though you're not actually joining, it could have implications. And during the onboarding processes with the applicable entities, if you do have any of those connections, our teams will work with you to make sure that everything is set up, that you understand how those connections work. And we have WEIM, EDAM interplay meetings where that could be addressed, and then different track meetings as well. So, but yes, you're correct.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. I think that's something that's slowly percolating its way through our organization, and some understand that implication better than others.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Yeah, you're not completely immune.
All right. Thanks.
Great question. Thanks, Paul. All right, so how are these three initiatives related? You've got the day ahead market enhancements, DAME, and their enhancements to our existing day ahead market. There are new products, the imbalance reserves and reliability capacity. So those are two products that have been have been created. We'll talk about those today. For the extended day ahead market, we're taking our existing day ahead market, which we're updating through the DAME process, and we're extending that and those capabilities to a wider market footprint. So those that are already participating in WEIM are the ones that can take that step to participate in EDAM. And then we've got EDAM ISO BAA participation rules. This addresses any of the unique aspects of how the ISO balancing authority area is going to participate in EDAM. So as I mentioned before, we're also a balancing authority area. We are going to be an EDAM entity, or we obviously have some unique features, but we are participating in EDAM as well. And so therefore, anybody within our footprint will be, will have changes due to that. So settlements is a part of all of this. The ISO provides settlement services. So we do that for both the day ahead and the real-time energy markets. We do conduct those with scheduling coordinators, and scheduling coordinators, as you saw a little bit earlier, can be different. They can be for transmission, they can be for EDAM entities, et cetera. So there's a process that you go through to that you need to go through in order to certify as a scheduling coordinator in order to do that kind of business with the ISO. The settlements, they apply to resources and loads that bid into and are awarded in the market. And then it covers settlements for energy produced and consumed and any of the associated charges that go along with that. The ISO is going to settle directly with EDAM entity FCs for certain transactions. We'll talk about the charge code matrix and the different charge codes that are applicable based on your role in a little bit. For EDAM entities, they can allocate settlements within their own balancing authority area. So they're going to need to figure that out in their balancing area. And then there's more details that you'll be able to find in the EDAM entities tariff about how they're going to be settling that. But we've already offered these settlements, but we've made quite a few updates to our settlements in order to accommodate the changes for these three initiatives. A point that I want to make sure that we hit upon, because this can get a little bit confusing sometimes, is that energy settlements, they take place in both the day-ahead market and the real-time market. So day-ahead energy markets, they settle energy awards, and that they're doing that for over a 24-hour period. So when you're bidding into the day-ahead, it's looking at that full 24 hours and making the optimization for that 24-hour horizon. And then it's going to settle, but then the real-time market includes both a 15-minute market, or FMM, with awards for each 15-minute interval, as well as the real-time dispatch awards for every 5-minute interval. So when you review your settlement files, you're going to notice that all the settlements are calculated down into a 5-minute increment. So even though the awards are looking over and the settlements and the prices are going to be for the applicable time horizons, again, whether 24-hour, the 15-minute, or 5-minute, in order for our system to consume that and kind of do a apples to apples approach, it's going to break everything down into the system into a 5-minute increment, even though, like I said, those may be hourly. This approach makes sure that we have consistency across the settlements. If there is a day-ahead energy award that feeds into another settlement, both can be broken down into comparable 5-minute quantities and prices. Because of the different time intervals and the various types of market awards, these multiple charge codes are used that we'll go through here. And many of the charge codes have been updated or many have been newly added. And those reflect the changes resulting from these three market initiatives And again, we're going to be pointing those out in today's class. But again, just important note about the different time frames, so we don't give you one settlement, $1 amount based on a resource. It's going to be what it's being awarded in these different time frames. So I mentioned a little bit ago that it's going to be a little higher level, but one of the things that we wanted you to do is to make sure that you get deeply involved in in some of these different meetings. So as Paul pointed out earlier, it's kind of like, oh, we're in the WEN, but this isn't really going to impact us, but it possibly could. So there's different avenues to be able to join to learn more about EDAM, about how this could be impacting you. And so there are different groups, the release user group, technical user groups, but the ones that I really want to focus on that a lot of you are already participating in, which is great because that's where you're going to get a lot of your detailed questions. You can go through city cases that you're putting in with your specific questions. So there's the settlement user group. It's also referred to as SUG. This is a biweekly forum. It's for market participants and RC West customers. It provides an opportunity to receive any kind of updates, ask questions, and also offer any input into the ISO initiatives and activities that are going to have an impact on settlements and also on an impact on invoicing. So these meetings, they're going to continue. So these aren't reliant on these particular initiatives. They are an ongoing something that we consistently hold. The market simulation calls, those are held twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays, and they're being done twice a week because of we're getting ready for these massive changes. But these are kind of determined, usually typically on a weekly basis, but also as needed based on the different projects that are happening. So these calls, they focus more on the implementation, the impacts, the timelines, milestones, other key details that are related to market initiatives. Yesterday we had a question about, when do we have to have everything in for EDAM, like our bids? And we were able to answer, April 30th, that's when everybody needs to make sure that they're putting in their bids. If they put them in earlier, they're going to have to go back and put them in again on the 30th in order to meet that May 1st date. So that's the kind of information that you're going to get in these market simulation meetings. Because actually when we were talking about that in class, there was a market sim meeting that they actually answered that question. So that's where you can go and really dig into more details, ask your questions, and you'll have subject matter experts there on the call and also market simulation leaders that will be able to give you information about environments and all the other good details. Additionally, we have monthly business practice manual or BPM meetings. They discuss proposed revision requests or PRRs that are in the initial or recommendation stages of BPM change management process. We're going to touch on that here in a couple more slides, but participation is strongly encouraged because it lets you know what's changing, and it also gives you a voice into making some suggestions. So there are still, there's always something that we're working through, lots of details, whether it be these projects or continuing projects that we have going through our stakeholder processes. So ongoing discussions, they're going to continue happening. So you're encouraged to stay engaged, make sure that you're participating and asking questions as you go. So let's get into the new and impacted charge codes. But first, where are you able to find information about all of these? One of the tools that is available is the draft of the DAME and EDAM charge code change summary with tariff mapping. This is going to show all the new and impacted charge codes, but it actually ties back to the tariff, which is, the ultimate rule So when you're kind of questioning this, you need some guidance. That's going to take you back to where this applies within the tariff. So let's kind of drill in here to what one of the lines would look like in here. So if you're looking at this particular spreadsheet, you're going to be able to find the charge code number. So each calculation for a particular particular function that ties back to market operations, to any kind of market activities, that is going to be in a charge code. So you're going to see the number there. You're also going to be able to see configuration guide tech doc title. So each one of the charge codes is in what we call a configuration guide. And so there's a title for each one, so you have an idea. For this one, charge code 8071, the charge code, the configuration guide charge code for 8071 is the day ahead imbalance reserve up settlement. So the new one that is referring to the new product of imbalance reserve that's part of DAME. You'll also be able to see the charge code name. As you can see there, again, it's the same name. And then you've got the charge code description. So it's going to let you know who it applies to. So for 8071, it applies to the ISO and also EDAM BAA. It is resource-specific settlement for IRU, which is the imbalance reserve up, and the IRU market price, so the or marginal price. It's going to settle with the LSE, the load serving entity, which is opted true up of the overlap RA usage. And then it's financial advisory settlements of transfer system resources, or TSRs, and then IRU awards. So that's going to let you know what you can find within this particular charge code, what it applies to and who it applies to. And then the completion priority tier, this was more for the development as we were going through and making the updates. So that's not quite as important, but then there's also a column for new or updated indicators. So is this a new charge code? There are quite a few charge codes, so you know, some of them are new, so this will indicate if that is the case. And then, like I mentioned before, you've got the reference to where you can find the relationship between this charge code and the tariff. So as I'm going along, I didn't mention this before, but Bo is doing a great job putting links in the chat so that you can get to all of these different resources as we're following along. We'll also make sure that when we post this presentation, the links are in there, and we will post all of these links so that you can get to those. And you know, because that's where you're going to find a lot of this information. There's so much information. The more you can kind of guide yourself to where you can find what's valuable to you, the better. So thanks for throwing those in there, Bo. There's also a draft design bill determinant standard and convention document. So the purpose of this document is to provide a design standard and naming convention for the settlement system configuration design, and also give direction to the people involved in the design and provide standard. Sorry, I'm going over my words. Naming convention, and that's going to be for the settlement system configuration design, and it will help move forward and implement successfully the required charge codes. So within this document, you'd find it, this is an example. This is one of the new sections that's been added, and it's for IR, so that's that imbalance reserve. And for those of you that were in the class yesterday, Bo took you through imbalance reserves, and we'll go through that a little bit more here in settlement. But here you're going to be able to find the attribute number, the symbol that is applicable to that, and then what the common attribute name is. So, you know, if you see a P, it's going to be price node ID. If you see a Q, it's an intertie ID. So getting familiar with what these attribute symbols are is going to help when you start going into the configuration guides and the different formulas, so that you know what kind of action the dollars that are being, that are coming out in your settlement statement, your invoices, what they actually refer to, what real world happening do these actually apply to. So I mentioned a minute ago business practice manuals. So we have these established business practices that implement our ISO tariff. So the BPM change management process, it provides a formal path to review and approve any kind of updates to existing BPMs, as well as BPMs that have not yet been implemented. So in the BPM document library, the ISO maintains a series of BPMs. Many of those have attachments, and the settlements and billing BPM is a little bit different because it has attachments. It has the main BPM available in both the clean and redline versions, and it also has several attachments. But there's also a collection of configuration guides, and those are basically an extension of the BPM. So these guides are going to provide the detailed information for each one of the charge codes that may appear on a settlement statement. So we're going to walk through an example of this in just a few minutes. But if you haven't gotten into these charge codes yet, you're going to find a lot of data. It can look overwhelming at first, but we'll break that down a little bit more. But there are different configuration guides for each one of the charge codes. On the BPM change management process page, you're going to find PRRs, or proposed revision requests. These outline the proposed changes to the existing business practice manuals. They also have new BPMs that are still moving through the approval process. An example of this is the EDAM BPM, which has been created for EDAM and is progressing toward full approval at this point. So if you're participating in the monthly meetings, you'll be able to see where we're at with that, get some more information, and be able to also provide comments. So if we click into the change management tool, there are several PRRs that link to changes affecting market operations, market instruments, so current BPMs that we have. But in PRR 1662 specifically, you're going to find proposed updates to the settlement configuration guides that are supporting the day-ahead market enhancements and EDAM and the ISO balancing authority areas participation in EDAM. So if you were to click on there, you're going to see this screen here. You're taken to the proposed revision request detail page. This page is going to include general information about the request, key announcements, impact analysis, recommendation comments, and the business rationale for each one of the proposed revisions. You're going to be able to also find applicable attachments that are associated with the PRR. And I wanted to show you this because there are a lot of links to documents that are being changed, these configuration guides, as part of the EDAM, and DAME initiatives. So in this case, the first attachment you're going to see is labeled DAME and EDAM Settlements A. So within this attachment, you're going to be able to find, excuse me, all the new and updated charge codes that are affected by the day-ahead market enhancements and the extended day-ahead market and the ISO balancing authority area participation rules initiatives. So this is a spreadsheet. It's kind of a shorter version of what I showed you a little bit earlier with the tariff mapping. It's a quicker view to be able to see what the charge codes are, the name of those charge codes, and whether or not they're new or just being updated because of these initiatives. So as I mentioned, it's going to show if it's new or not. And then existing charge codes, they are being updated for a variety of reasons, including changes to predecessor and successor relationships, system inputs, formula revisions. Some of the changes that are happening in the configuration guides and charge codes are more extensive than others. One of the more frequent items that you'll see in these, the changes that are happening to a lot of these are the addition of Q prime in a lot of these formulas, and that is going to be something you're going to see in these in order to accommodate the applicable balancing authority area to be able to be accurately represented in the settlements. Couple of other links that attachments that you're going to be able to see in this PRR 1662 are some initial comments that have come in, and then also the configuration guides. So this is a zipped file, but inside of here, you're going to find all of the configuration guides that have been updated or are new. And there are in total 139. So while 139 configuration guides might sound a little intimidating, and the material is certainly complex in these, the good news is that there is supporting documentation, a spreadsheet that is designed to help you navigate through those and manage the information more easily. So this is the charge code matrix draft. So there is a charge code matrix that is on the settlements website, but there's also in the release planning page the draft version of this, and this includes all of the changes that are happening because of these initiatives. So this is a tool that we provide to help you sort through the charge codes and identify which ones you may see or may expect to see on your settlement statements. You won't see them all the time, but at least you have an idea of if you were to see a certain charge code, happen to be on one of your settlement statements, you can go back and go, yes, that does apply to me. That you can kind of understand or be better at understanding which ones you would expect to be seeing. So the spreadsheet does include the charge code numbers. It includes charge code names, the group it belongs to, such as ancillary services, imbalance reserves, congestion. So you're going to be able to see that kind of information. It also is going to show you the effective date for each one of the charge codes, along with the termination date or anticipated termination date. So there are some charge codes that are actually being terminated because of the changes, some that have already been terminated and some that will be terminated as of May 1st. So you can go through this spreadsheet and take a look at that and see which one, what those effective dates are. At a high level, this matrix is going to identify billable quantity that's associated with each one of the charge codes, and that could be metered demand within a GHG regulation area, imbalance reserve up or down, or day-ahead energy awards. And the configuration guides are, when you go into those, they're going to provide obviously a lot more detail, but this gives you a higher level of, okay, I can at least get a general idea of what I'm going to be, what this is going to apply to that's happening, in the day ahead, in the real time, whatever that particular time interval is. So in this particular version of the matrix, all of the newly added charge codes are highlighted in green. So one of the examples here is 8086. It's kind of small on my screen. And that is one for the day ahead imbalance reserve down tier 1 allocation. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But that's an example of one of the new charge codes that has been created. It's part of the imbalance reserve group. It will not go into effect until May 1st. And the termination date is open. So if there's no intention of closing it anytime soon, you're going to see a status of open. It shows you the billable quantity, which is a negative or positive deviation for supply or demand between the day-ahead schedule energy and the FMM ex-post capacity or the FMM schedule. So again, that kind of gives you an idea of what kind of information you would be able to find in there. You can also see who that applies to in the different columns. So this is a much bigger, much more robust spreadsheet. And so you're just seeing a snapshot here. So again, it is quite extensive. And so there are additional columns that are not on here because I wanted you to be able to at least see some of this. But there are different columns such as demand, metered substation, subsystems, convergence bidding. So whether you represent supply resources like pumped storage generation, maybe limited energy resources, demand resources, such as dispatchable demand response, or a metered subsystem, you can filter this spreadsheet and then quickly identify which one of the charge codes are going to apply to you. There are a few new columns that are part of this version that has been added to accommodate EDAM. So these columns, they're grouped with the WEIM, since an EDAM entity must be a WEIM entity. So for each one of the charge codes, the cell will indicate whether it applies to EDAM, WEIM, or both. So, you know, using an E or a W is going to indicate whether it does apply to the EDAM entity or if it applies to the WEIM action, so the real-time actions. If you click on a cell that has a C, that's going to indicate that the charge code applies to participants within the California ISO Balancing Authority area. And you can see the legend up here. So this charge code matrix is currently available on the release planning page. It's under the settlements release technical document section. Over time, it will end up moving onto the settlements webpage to replace the current one. Thank you, Bo. You already put the link to the charge code matrix in there. So Emily, I'm not sure if I'll try to answer your question the way I think it's going to be. So in some of these, you're going to see if they have an impact on both WEIM and EDAM. If it's just an E, it just applies to EDAM. There are some that are a W, it's not in this example, but there are a few that just show if they are for WEIM only. Does that answer that question or? All right, thanks, Bo. Yep, okay, perfect. So yeah, it's just a screenshot right here, snapshot, but there are, if you open this up and scroll down, you are going to be able to find different ones that have just W only. So yeah, definitely please scroll through that and get more familiar, because this is really a good tool to help kind of guide y'all. All right, so that's some of the foundational information that will help you, guide you to where you can find the information, start sorting it. A little less overwhelming than just scrolling through, 139 different charge codes, and those are just the ones that are changed or new per EDAM and DAME. So that will at least help guide you to more of that information. But now let's start talking about some of the content that you would find in there. We're going to start by talking about imbalance reserves and reliability capacity, two of the new DAME and DAME products. So first, we're going to level set by identifying why the imbalance reserves and the reliability capacity exist in DAME and EDAM. So these products, they were introduced to make sure that the system can handle any kind of uncertainty between the day-ahead forecast and what actually happens in real time. So think of imbalance reserves kind of as a safety net. They're going to provide that upward and downward ramping capability so that we can respond quickly if the net load changes. So it's just kind of reserving something back so that we can act quickly. The reliability capacity works alongside that. Make sure that each one of the balancing authority areas brings enough physical capability to the table to keep the system reliable. So the imbalance reserves, they're determined through hourly evaluations that identify when additional energy is going to be needed for a trade hour. So these reserves, they're going to provide capacity above the day ahead schedule. That makes sure that we have the real-time dispatch. It's going to be able to meet the demand forecast plus any kind of upward uncertainty. The process addresses expected variations in load and supply between the day-ahead market and the real-time market. It uses net load forecasts, the demand minus wind and solar output, and also historical uncertainty data. The hourly analysis is going to compare the advanced energy purchases of real-time needs, and differences dictate the type and amount of reserves that are going to be required. That can vary throughout the day. And then through the DAME and EDAM, market participants can benefit from these netting uncertainties across the system because it reduces the need to carry the imbalance reserves individually. So again, you've got a bigger pool, you can help each other out more with that. So it reduces that burden on the individuals to have as much in reserve. The reserve capacity below the day-ahead schedule, it must be available for real-time dispatch to accommodate the downward uncertainty that makes sure that there's flexibility. And that flexibility allows us to reduce the generation when the actual load is lower than forecasted. So SCs, they can submit bids through the cyber system or through their own third-party software for the imbalance reserve up and imbalance reserve down products, and they may receive hourly awards for both of these products, both the up and down direction. The other new product, capacity product, and an enhancement is the change to the residual unit commitment or RUC process. Those of you that are already participating in the day-ahead market, you're familiar with RUC. It happens after the integrated forward market. And so this RUC process, it makes sure that there is sufficient supply to go into real time. But in these new changes, we're introducing a reliability capacity product, or RC. So you're going to see from a market standpoint, RC quite a bit different than a reliability coordinator. But unlike the existing RUC process, which procures that additional capacity to meet the forecasted demand, the reliability capacity provides both the upward and the downward dispatch capability, making sure that each one of the entities has sufficient physical supply that's scheduled in the day-ahead time frame in order to meet their own balancing authority areas load forecast. So both of the reliability capacity products, they are hourly requirements. They are at the balancing authority area level, and they will be awarded at the resource level to meet the requirement. In the same fashion as awards for the imbalance reserves, the reliability capacity awards will come from bids. Those will be from across the entire market footprint. Scheduling coordinators submit those bids for the reliability capacity up and reliability capacity down. But unlike the imbalance reserves that you can get awards for both up and down, you will only get either up or down for the reliability capacity. So a little bit about the differences, the key differences between imbalance reserves and reliability capacity. They are similar, but they serve some different purposes in the day-ahead market. The imbalance reserves, as mentioned, are based on historical data. They're designed to manage uncertainty in load, wind, and solar forecasts. And they, as we mentioned before, require both the up and down reserves for each hour. And the scheduling coordinators can receive those hourly awards, again, for both up and down. Whereas reliability capacity, on the other hand, is specific to a unique trade date. It ensures that there's enough supply that's purchased in the day-ahead market Its requirement is for either up or down capacity per hour, and the scheduling coordinators may only receive an hourly award for one capacity type. So in short, just kind of recap it, imbalance reserves focus on uncertainty, while reliability capacity focus on securing sufficient supply. So since this is a settlements class, we've been talking about charge codes. There are charge codes that are associated with the imbalance reserve up and down, as well as the reliability capacity up and down. So some of the new charge codes you're going to see is 8071, which and 8081, which talk about the day ahead imbalance reserve up and down settlements. And then you've got the tier 1 allocations for the imbalance reserve up and down, as well as the tier 2 imbalance reserve up and down. And those are in charge codes 8077. So these are the different charge codes that you're going to be able to go into and get the details about the formulas, etc. I believe you're right. It should be 8087. So thank you, Matthew. I've got a typo. I was kind of looking at that going, I don't think that's right. So thank you for that. I need to make an update to that one. So the settlement that we have for the reliability capacity up and down are shown here. So you've got the reliability capacity up settlement and down. And then there's also a tier 1 and tier 2 for the RUC capacity allocation for both, again, the up and the down. And I see there's a question there. Maybe you can throw that one to one of our subject matter experts, Bo, and see if they can answer in the chat.
It's on its way.
Thank you. Perfect. And we are going to talk about, yep, we're going to talk about the difference between tier 1 and tier 2 here in a few minutes. So thanks. So stay tuned. We're going to get there. All right. So let's go ahead and take a walk through one of the charge code configuration guides. So Bo is putting a link to the charge code if you wanted to follow along. The version that he has a link to is on the release planning page. It's slightly different than the one that I'm going to walk through, because the one that I'm going to walk through is actually part of that BPM process. But I gave you this link because you can get to it more quickly. The other one, you're going to have to open up a zip file, and so you're more than welcome to do that. I think we put that in the chat a little bit earlier with the BPM. So if you already have that one up, that's the version I'm going to be looking at. But this one is not too far off. But it's more the information that we're going to see that's not too far different. So let's go ahead and gonna hop into all right. So we're gonna go into the charge code configuration guide for charge code 8071. So that's the day ahead imbalance reserve up settlement. So those of you that, maybe you're very familiar with the charge codes, the configuration guide, might be like, Jan, I get this already. But some people haven't been through this, so wanted to kind of take a walk through, make these a little less intimidating, because these are going to be what you see for each one of the charge codes, and the format's going to be the same. It's just going to be the content that's a little bit different for each one of those. But in each one of the charge code configuration guides, you're going to see the purpose of the document. You're going to see an introduction. It's going to talk about the background, the description of this charge code, what it's for. And you're also going to see the charge code requirements. So it's going to take you through business rules, predecessor charge codes, successor charge codes, inputs, and then formulas, and outputs. And then you're also going to be able to see what the charge code effective dates are. You might be wondering why I have this in an edited document. You see Mel does a lot of the work on here. It's one of our helpful subject matter experts that's, I think, on chat. And but I left it here because this is the version that you're going to see in the business practice manual. And this gives you a chance to see any kind of adjustments that have been made, any kind of updates that are part of the PRR at this point. So if we scroll down here, as I mentioned, the purpose of the document is just telling you what these are for. This will give you a background. We just talked about what imbalance reserves are, why they are there. So this gives you kind of an idea of which, what's the purpose of these. So it might give you a better idea, before you start just hopping right into formulas and calculations, to be able to understand kind of how this applies back to the things that are happening in the day-ahead market in real time in the different time frames or for different services. So this gives you a rundown of the imbalance reserves, what they're there for, some of the details about those. So it's a good read to kind of understand it. Then you're going to get 2.2, which is a description. It's going to talk about the charge code, 8071, which is what we're looking at. And it says that it's going to perform the calculations necessary to implement the business rules identified in the business rules of the following section here. So the business rules are what we're starting to get into, which are going to talk about, the details. So when is this charge code going to be calculated? It's going to be something that's calculated on a daily basis. So it will give you that information if it's one that's, a monthly calculation, if you're looking at a different charge code. So it's going to give you things like that about the calculation dates, what it's applicable to, resources, with imbalance reserve up awards in the day-ahead market. So if you're looking at your settlement statement and you don't have resources that are bidding for imbalance reserve up and down, because the resources do have to be qualified in order to be able to provide those services, then you wouldn't expect to see that on your settlement statement. But if your resources are capable, this is one that you would expect to see. It's going to tell you about the associate, the scheduling coordinators, how they're referenced, whether by business associate ID, who we're settling with. It's going to talk about the formulas and the kind of payments that are made. It's going to talk about the IFM, the Integrated Forward Market, IR payments. So it'll give you details on that and how the resource price is derived, in this case, from the applicable P node or aggregated P node prices. It's going to talk about the IRU unavailability non-compliance charges. So there's those kind of charges that are associated with it, a 5-minute imbalance reserve quantity. So you can kind of get an idea of the different information that you can find, the different details, so you know when this is applying, when this is applicable. So there's more than just, here's my resource, I got 50 megawatts. It's like there's also these different components that are part of the calculation that are going to indicate what those, what you get settled with. There's information about the overlapping RA capacity. So that's some information that you can find in here. And then some of the new information that's come in is that the settlement and corresponding settlement BD, which are billing determinant files under this charge code for the LSC or the LSC ID, are going to be with its financial or market SC representing the I can't talk anymore, LSC. In other words, attribute BA ID B correspond to the financial SC or the market SC representing the LSC ID. And then for adjustments on the charge code that cannot be accomplished by correction of upstream data inputs recalculation or operator override pass-through bill charge logic is going to be applied. So those are some of the new pieces that have been added, maybe if you've been following along with these, that are going through the BPM process right now. I mentioned the predecessor charge codes and also the successor charge codes. These might be charge codes that have a value that feed into the calculation in this particular charge code. It may also have a pre-calculation pre-calc that is part of there. So you could see either or here in the predecessor charge code. So those are ones that have been calculated, feed into the charge code. And then you've got the successor charge code. So those are the ones that after this is processed, this data gets fed into others, such as the flex ramp up, uncertainty capacity settlement, the day ahead imbalance reserve up, tier 1 allocation, and the pre-calc for day ahead congestion, pre-calc for IFM net amount, etc. So you kind of get an idea also which other charge codes do have an impact on this particular charge code, and what impact does this charge code have on others. Here in the inputs, you're going to be able to find the variable names. Earlier, we looked at a document that has those billing determinants, some of those attributes that you'll see here. But you can kind of start to look and get a familiarity with what is the settlement referring to. So in the variable name, for instance, first one, BA hourly resource is IRU, scheduled quantity. So you can kind of start breaking those down, and then the description is going to tell you that this is the hourly IFM imbalance reserve up schedule quantity for each resource for every hour or every trading day. So going through these, kind of getting familiar with, this is what the breakdown is. BA hourly resource IRU 5 MR or 5M ramp capable. So it's a 5-minute ramping capability portion of that award. So using this to kind of look at these, maybe, can be kind of intimidating, but figuring out what are these descriptions, what is it trying to tell me, what is it associating to, is going to be very important. So there have been a couple of changes, as you can see here. For a couple of these, the changes have been made where it used to be a monthly component, but now it's daily. So it's going to give you that kind of information. In this one, it's got the attribute VAIDB corresponds to the financial. So that note that was up above, you could see where it starts to feed into these values here below. So into these variable names. So then there's also the inputs, the predecessor charge codes, or pre-calculations. Then it gets into the ISO formula. So this is going to tell you that this is the daily settlement of intertide deviations for each business associate by trading date. It's derived according to the formula below. So now you start to get into all those calculations. So that information that you saw up above, you start to see that plugged into these calculations, and you start to see the relationship between those there. So familiarizing yourself with the information that's up above is going to help when you start to look at how these formulas start working together. And I won't go through all these formulas with you. You're welcome. Or maybe I'm just, you're welcome to myself. But those are the different calculations. You're going to see them for the different reasons. Calculations for RA, resource SC, you'll see a title in there. Calculation for TSRs, the transmission system resources, miscellaneous calculations. So those are all the different calculations that you're going to be able to see that are in there. There's also the outputs. So you're going to be able to look at those. So again, you're seeing these these values, and then you're going to be able to look at the description for settlement period amount for this charge code, non-compliance charge has been factored in. Some of those details for the outputs that you're going to expect to see from these different calculations. And you might see, like in this case, one of them has been completely removed. So going through these different configuration guides is going to show you what those changes are, especially if you're looking at the red line version at this point. And then, as I mentioned, kind of wraps up with the effective dates, which you also saw on the charge code matrix. So, you start to see that this is the version, this is the effective date, and then it's open. So all those materials that are out there, but that's where that charge code matrix can help point you right to here. So this was just a quick walkthrough of what you're going to be expecting to see in each one of the charge codes in the configuration guides. Okay, hop back to our presentation here. So we had a question about the imbalance reserve and reliability capacity, tier 1 and tier 2 settlement. And Alma, I see that there's a hand raised, so go ahead.
Might be double muted. Oh, it looks like an inadvertent.
Well, at least you know it works, so that's a good thing. So, thanks, Alma. All right. If you ever do have another question, you know how to raise your hand now, so you're good. All right. So now we're going to talk about the imbalance reserve and reliability capacity, tier 1 and tier 2 settlements. And we'll do our best. I'm going to check to see. We have Manoj on the call, so might need to call in a subject matter expert during this part. So I'm just kind of getting you ready there, just in case I don't see Mel on here. So Manoj, you're my guy today. So, all right. So for this section, we're going to talk about tier 1 and tier 2 roles in EDAM. We're going to explain the purpose of the tier 1 and tier 2 cost allocation, how they address the sufficiency obligations of the residual system needs, interpret a couple of the key formulas for tier 1 average price, tier 2 calculation, and identify kind of some of the updates. So, and we'll look at the different charge codes that are associated. So there are similarities and differences. We just went through the differences and the similarities between the imbalance reserve and the reliability products. But when we get to settlements, who receives those settlements, who receives the allocations, the cost allocation for the imbalance reserves and reliability capacity, that happens in 2 tiers. So first, there's the tier 1 that assigns costs to the main contributors who created the need for these products. So this tier is capped at the lower price between the average or derived price for each balancing authority area. And we'll look at an example to kind of walk through this to kind of help and make a little bit more sense. It's going to be a simplified example, but it kind of, will paint that picture. But essentially, the tier 1, it's going to divide the total procurement cost by the total product awards or the total tier 1 allocation quantities, and that's going to be within each balancing authority area. So when it comes to the tier 1 allocations, the main contributors differ for each product. For imbalance reserves, the contributors include generation, imports, exports, and load. For reliability capacity, the key contributors are net virtual awards and uninstructed imbalance energy, or UIE. The IR and the RC, they both have tier 1 and tier 2 allocations. For both up and down, those costs are allocated first to the main contributors for the need to procure the respective products. Tier 1 is then capped by the lower price between the average or derived price per BAA, and that's arrived at by dividing the total cost to procure the product by the total product award or the total tier 1 allocation quantities per balancing authority area. So after allocating to tier 1, if any of those costs remain, those become allocated in tier 2, which is then spread to the measured demand in the ISO. So derived prices, they're calculated to allocate tier 2 costs, and they are intended to do that fairly across the balancing authority areas when there is a residual amount. So let's say that it's $10,000 we need to collect for imbalance reserve up, and through tier 1 we were only able to collect 6,000. So then in tier 2 we're going to need to go and collect that remaining 4,000. So what we are paying at the generators for the IR gets, peanut buttered basically, spread across the measured demand. So both imbalance reserve and reliability capacity are costs are reduced by no pay for awards, with the RC as the responsibility of the resource owners who receive those product awards. So after the tier 1 is complete, any of the remaining costs, those move to tier 2. Again, like I mentioned, are spread across meter demand in the balancing authority area. So in short, the tier 1 targets those driving the need, and then tier 2 shares the leftover costs, but that's on a more broad basis. So let's look at a generic example. Let's say that the system needs 500 megawatts of imbalance reserve up. Based on the certain conditions we may have found, we don't need the full 500 megawatts, so we procured 480 megawatts with 20 megawatts of relaxation, since we're not going to collect on the residual. In order to allocate what was procured for imbalance reserve up, we then collect for the 480 megawatts in tier 1, and tier 2, the first tier, is for those resources that had obligations. But the balance is whatever's left over from what we collected in tier 1, and that goes into tier 2. So basically, tier 2, that's the remainder after we have accounted for the main contributors for the need to procure the product. And like mentioned, that is spread across the metered load, sometimes across the measured load. So we're not going to really talk through this calculation, but this gives you an idea of what we're talking about when we're going through. There's the cost allocations. So this is the calculation that you would be looking at that would break it down, but I'm going to kind of just breeze through these couple of next slides that just show the calculation. This is for the imbalance reserve up in tier 1 and tier 2, and we're going to go to an example that is going to make it a lot more clear than this. But there are, you can kind of take this presentation once it's posted. If you wanted to dig deeper into the calculations, here they are. You will also be able to find these calculations in the charge code, the configuration guide. And then you'll see here there's a part 2 for the reliability capacity settlement. There's a part 2 and there's a part 4. Down in the reference of this presentation, you will actually be able to see the other parts that go with this as well. And there was a discussion about this in a class in December. So there was further detail, but really what we ended up getting back to was this piece right here. So all those complicated calculations really come down to this example here. So we're gonna break this down, and in this simplified, which is a very simplified example, The costs are first going to be collected at the BA level, where the balancing authority has a total reliability capacity up, or RCU. We're going to do the RCU in this example. And let's say in this one, there's a cost of $1,000. It was derived from awards multiplied by pricing across the entire balancing authority area and applied, and that was regardless of the product. Across this BAA, the total awarded capacity is 500 megawatts. Next, we are going to identify the main contributors for the allocation. And that's going to vary depending on whether the resource is IR or RC. Again, in this example, we're walking through an RC, the reliability capacity. And so if we look at this in this example, the total tier allocation quantity that was across all the resources and scheduling coordinators within the BA is 200. So this is kind of that first grouping of information is kind of setting the stage, kind of putting in some numbers there. But now we're going to work through how this end up going down into the tier 1 and tier 2. So we've got these values established. We now are going to calculate the two prices. We're going to click, we're going to do an average balancing authority price of $2. So we came up with that by dividing the RCU cost with the total RCU award, and that brought us to 2. So that gives us the average price, and the derived price is 5. And this is derived, it's calculated by dividing the same $1,000 cost by the $200 allocation, or by the 200 allocation quantity. So the tier 1 price, it's defined as the lower of these two. So in this example, it is $2. The price forms the basis for the allocating the tier 1 costs before any remaining costs are assigned to tier 2. So if we look down here, we've got this balancing authority area. In this example, it includes 3 scheduling coordinators. So we're looking at that balancing authority area, their scheduling coordinators that are within their area. And based on that, we looked at the allocation quantity. And for scheduling coordinator 1, they had a value of 100. For SC2, allocation quantity was 75, and SC3, the allocation quantity was 25. So the total quantity for the scheduling coordinator at each BA was 200. So that's what our total is here. So now we want to look at the tier 1 allocations, which are the costs at each balancing authority area. So we're going to multiply that the tier 1 allocation quantity by SC at each balancing authority area. We're going to multiply that by the tier 1 price, which is 2. And based on that, that is going to give us the total allocation for each one of these, the allocation costs by SC at each one of these balancing authority areas. So SC1, then their total allocation cost is 200 because we've multiplied their 100 allocation quantity by the $2 price for the 200. Then for SC2, multiplying that by 2, 150, and then 50 for SC3 allocation cost. So now we still started back. We want to look back at what those total costs were. They were $1,000. So we need to go back and compare against that. So our total costs here were 400, but we still need to make sure that we're allocating for that full 1,000. So the tier, now we're going to push this into the tier 2 because we've got a remaining value of $600 to be assigned That's going to go into tier 2, and that's going to be allocated to the metered load. So that's a more simplified version of how the tiers work. So again, we're looking at, what are all these costs? What is going to be covered in tier 1? Whatever is left over that we need to go and allocate is going to be done in the tier 2. So any questions? See that there's some other questions, and Bo, thank you very much for doing a fantastic job working with our SMEs. All right, Morale, I see your hand is raised.
I'm sorry, I did not understand how did the tier 2 cost to be allocated to meter load arrive to 600. Maybe I missed that.
Okay. Yes. So when we figured out the total right here, the 400, those were the total costs for the SCs at the BAs. So those are the allocated costs. There was still a shortfall between the 100 or 1,000 and the 400, and so that's where the 600 came in.
Understood.
So yeah. So if this had been like, $5 and the prices would have been different, then this number would change, because this needs to be subtracted. This total tier 1 cost, I should have had a better arrow to go back up to there. We're looking at the difference between this total tier 1 cost and the total RCU cost. Does that help?
Yes, thank you, Hedy.
Perfect, thanks, great question. All right. Any other questions?
Oh, maybe Heidi, Alva, if you don't mind coming off mute, just give you a little bit more clarification on the question, if possible. I think it refers to day ahead in real time AVER output and consideration for uninstructed imbalance and relation to reliability capacity allocated to VERS. If you don't mind providing a little bit more clarification, we're working with our SMEs, but they need a little bit more color on that if possible. If you're double muted, or if it's okay in the chat too, we can communicate that one. Oh.
Like we're having some technical issues. Are we able to unmute Alba?
Looks like she's on her phone. Okay, maybe we could communicate over the chat, and I think we have a hand raised as well.
Yes.
Yes. Just a quick question. The price will be the same, right, as the tier 1, or does tier 2 have a different price to cover the 600?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
So when we did the calculation, the tier 1 cost, the total is 400, right? That's $400, and we have 600 that is left that will be spread depending on meter load for the tier 2, right?
Correct.
All right. So then the price, because we calculated with a price of 2 for tier 1, correct? So is that going to be the same price for tier 2? Or is it just the price is just based on how we calculate the cost, and it's not
tier
actual?
Tier 2 price can be different because that's a different way of calculating the tier 2 price. The tier 2 price for IR, it's an weighted average of the tier cost divided by the tier 2 quantity. So it's the other price, the tier 1 quantity is the required, if it is for IRU, it is a maximum of you have a required price or the derived price, right? So the prices can be different. The second,
Okay.
the tier 2 is a weighted average price.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great question. Thanks, Manoj. All right. Looks like there's some questions going on, but it looks like you've got that covered with Elva both, so I'll let you continue
Yeah.
on with that one.
Mhm.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, and the 1,000 is kind of a made up number for this, but really what we're looking at there is the RCU cost. So that is the cost that is derived from awards that are multiplied by pricing across the entire balancing authority area and applied it applied to that area regardless of the product. So. And we just made up the 1,000 in this example for simplicity, but that's where that comes from. Did that help, or did you need more information on that? Yes, we kind of went by it pretty quickly, but as far as where this is calculated, so here you can find where those calculations are. We didn't go into it in any kind of depth, but you'll be able to go back through that with the slides once we get those posted. But if you have questions right now, Manoj, I don't know if you would be able to help.
What was the question? Sorry.
There's a question about how we calculate the $1,000. So if we go back to this example right here,
So
for
it
the
is the
RCU.
yeah, it is award times the price. Suppose one resource there, if it is their RCU award is 100 megawatt and their price is $10. That is 100 times 10. That's that price. And we aggregate it for all resource, right? Or all resource have RCU. I mean, it's just for if there is a 10 resource, right? If it is all resources combined together, that price. That makes sense.
Does that help, Zen? I hope I'm saying your name right. One. David, I'm not sure. We had another question. Is the 1,000 essentially the procurement cost for RCU in this hour? Would you be able to answer that, Manoj?
Sorry, let me. So this $1,000. 1 minute. Thinking. No, that's not the procurement cost.
So it is the cost for having to go and, I mean, because we are looking at what are those costs for going out and having to procure. So I guess, I mean, I could see, is that what he's saying, Manoj? Since we are having to procure that reliability capacity based on the need for.
Yeah, give me a minute. Let me confirm it. Okay.
Okay. We'll get back to you on that one, David. So yeah, we'll get some more information for you as well that would help. So Rose, unless the BAA has visibility of the SC settlements, the BAA cannot validate these charges. That is something that you would have to, work with, maybe coordinate on how to get that information, see if your SC, and the BAA, can coordinate, because you can endorse people to be able to provision access for the ID, but it really is kind of a discussion that you need to have between the two of you, how you're going to share that information. So that, I know it can get a little bit challenging from that. So, all right. So just a quick moment. So we're going to work on more of that information for you all, but the imbalance reserve and reliability capacity summary, just to kind of summarize, the imbalance reserves up and down are procured to meet uncertainty needs between the day ahead and real-time markets. And this kind of goes back to your question for the reliability capacity up and down. Those are procured. So it is a procurement, to ensure that there's enough resources committed to meet each BAA's demand forecast. So, when we, clear the market, the IFM, and there is not a sufficient amount of capacity, then we are going to need to go back and procure those resources, those resources that have bid in their reliability capacity up and down bids. The market will procure those to fill that uncertainty. And then for the imbalance reserve up and down, those costs are going to be allocated through the two-tier settlements based on what's procured. And then the costs for the reliability capacity are going to be allocated through the two-tier systems. So we're going to go ahead and take a break right now. We've been going for about an hour and a half. So let's take a 10-minute break, and we will come back here at 10:40.
Heidi, I had a question in the chat.
Yeah.
This is about the RCD costs. As you just wanted to understand, like, so a load could have both of these charges in the same hour. It's not mutually exclusive, are they?
So you're going to only get an award for the reliability capacity up or reliability capacity down for that particular hour. So for the imbalance reserve, you can have both up and down, but for the reliability capacity, you can put it in your bids, but it will only give you the award for reliability capacity up or the down.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, but it also increases if that's any kind of
All right, we'll take a short break and be back at 10:40 Pacific prevailing.
Perfect. Thanks. All right. Welcome back from break, everybody. Hope you got a little stretch break in there. We're going to go ahead and keep going with the imbalance reserve portion of the Flex Ramp product. So we've got our SMEs on in the chat. We're answering as many questions as we can as quickly as possible. Thanks, Bo, for working on that. We really appreciate it. So he's posting some of those answers in the chat, and we'll continue to get more answers for you. But moving ahead into imbalance reserve portion of the Flex Ramp product. So flexible ramping product, it's a market mechanism. It's designed to make sure that there's grid reliability. It allows us to procure additional ramping capacity to manage forecast uncertainty and rapid changes in net load. And that's done especially during steep load transitions, like those caused by solar generation drop-offs at sunset. It can help system balance, maintain that system balance by securing resources that can quickly ramp up or down in real time to meet the demand fluctuations. Well, let's talk about it just a little bit more here. So the flexible ramping product does have a relationship between imbalance reserve or with imbalance reserves. So the Flex Ramp product, it works in real time, and it kind of works like a hurricane path projection. You've seen those on the news, on the weather channels, where there's a forecasted trajectory, but uncertainty remains because the actual path can still change. So they're kind of accounting for that, where it's like, hopefully it goes on a nice straight path and everybody's good to go, but you've got to account for those possibilities that it can go in different areas. So that's that uncertainty. So we do a lot of planning. We use forecasts, system data, bids, and other inputs to prepare for the flow of energy in real time. These plans will allow us to help us fine-tune operations, but system conditions still can be unpredictable. So we need to account for that uncertainty. And so, we've got to, like I mentioned, prepare for that kind of uncertainty and the unpredictability. So we have tools like the Flex Ramp product, and we have the tool, like we have imbalance reserves that we're putting into the day-ahead market. And again, that flexible ramp product in the real-time market. These are both tools that will help us manage uncertainty and maintain both market efficiency and system reliability when conditions change unexpectedly. So when we buy the imbalance reserves, we're actually procuring that uncertainty. It means that we're really basically paying to keep extra capacity available in case these things change unexpectedly. Later in real time, we also need that flexibility to handle those sudden changes. So we're ready for that in both having the imbalance reserves and the flex ramping product to ensure that we've got unloaded capacity, that it's reserved, that we're ready to meet any of those energy needs. So from an IR and FR interaction, the payment logic and settlement rules, here's the important piece. If we already paid for that capacity in the day ahead, we don't want to pay for it again in real time because it's being procured for the same capacity to be dispatched in real time. So for example, if we have a resource that can provide 20 megawatts of ramp capability in the 5-minute, that resource can provide flexible ramp for 20 megawatts in the 5 minutes, but also provide imbalance reserves, which is a 30-minute product. So then when we get to real time, we're just confirming that the system can, should hold that capacity back and not make another payment on that. If there's no megawatt difference between the day ahead and the real time, or the IR and the FRP, there is not going to be a second payment. If those megawatts were released as energy, then we get charged at the flex ramp price. So the reason being that the resource was released for energy and the market had to go procure it from somebody else. So therefore, the market will pay that resource for its new obligation and charge the resource that was released for capacity. So for the deviation settlement, we're going to charge the other resource the market had originally procured the 20 megawatts for as 20 megawatts times the higher of the flexible ramp price or the imbalance reserve price. So that's because we're going to be replacing that capacity with another resource capacity, and that changes the marginal price of the capacity. If the resource procures for 20 megawatts and 20 megawatts, they're not paid anything, we're just reaffirming them that the market is holding capacity back and not paying anything more because they've already received payment. So the bottom line is if the capacity is used for both IR and FRP, we're only going to pay once. Extra charges happen only when the resource releases its reserved capacity as energy and the market needs to then go back and replace that. For forecasting and settlement, what gets paid for, we're determining what portion of your movement is due to the day ahead or the base schedule for EIM entities, which is why we're calculating a day ahead forecasted movement as well as a base schedule forecasted movement. Any day ahead forecasted movement is already incorporated into the day ahead LMP. So if it's a base schedule forecasted movement, it's going to be incorporated into the bilateral pricing. So we don't want to pay for that forecasting movement. So that's why we're taking the 15-minute forecasting movement, which is based on total scheduled movement, and subtract off your day ahead portion of base portion. So this is going to tell you that the FMM incremental forecasting movement, what it is, and that's what you get paid. So what does this mean? Let's say you have the day ahead, we have a generator that's going from 80 megawatts in hour ending 12 to 90 megawatts in hour ending 13. So that's 10 megawatts of forecasted movement that will be paid to the day ahead LMP, or if base scheduled the bilateral pricing. So let's look at the calculations here. So for FRU and IRU awards, the flex ramp up and imbalance reserve up awards, they're settled as you see here below. The flex ramp up uncertainty settlement is to avoid double payment. You've got the FRU uncertainty quantity minus the 5-minute ramp capable IRU quantity times the FRU price. For the IRU award settlement, which is the imbalance reserve up, you've got the IRU award quantity times the IRU price. For the IRU settlement, for non-compliance quantity portion, you've got the IRU non-compliance, the quantity times the price, which is the IRU price and the FRU price. The settlements that apply here are those that we saw earlier for the imbalance reserves, these charge codes here. We've got that same 8077, so yes, that's going to be corrected as well. And then we've got the flex ramp charge codes that are associated, so 7071 and 8071 for the flex ramp up and down. So I see a question here from David. Isn't the IR up essentially the equivalent to what we would call contingent spinning? Is it not loaded up on their resource and day ahead, but in real time the resource can deliver energy from the ICF megawatts? So you do have to be 15-minute dispatchable. So could be the same ones that could be considered for ancillary service products. I don't know if I'm getting to your question, David. All right. And there is a qualification, so it can't be a resource that takes forever to to start. So it would have to be something that's in the operating reserves family, so meet the time horizon, yeah. Yes. All right. So those are the oh, there's no real color indication. So it's just art. It's just art. So,
I have a quick question. Is that a charge code correct? 8071 for flexible ramp down or 70 hour settlement? I think that was already
this, I
started
think,
in
yeah,
another one.
yeah, I noticed that and I was like, oh, guess, yeah, that was taken from the other one and just rearranged. So that needs to be corrected and it will be corrected before I repost this on the training center. So apologies for that. All right. Any other questions for imbalance reserve before we move into talking about resource sufficiency evaluation? Oh, Julio, I see your hand is raised.
I already commented on it. I think the charge codes were incorrect.
Oh, good. Okay, perfect. Thanks. I saw your hand still up, so I was like, oh, all right. I'm going to lower your hand right there. Thank you. All right. So day ahead resource sufficiency evaluation. So for those of you that have been participating in the WEIM, you're familiar with resource sufficiency evaluation, but that's done for each hour. There are different components for that, but we are extending that to the day ahead. And so the resource sufficiency evaluation, this is a critical mechanism that we have in the ISO market. And the main purpose is to make sure that each participating balancing authority area brings enough resources to meet its own forecasted demand and reliability needs before it starts relying on transfers from other entities. So the purpose of the RSE is to prevent over-reliance on market transfers. The RSE ensures that balancing authority areas are not leaning too heavily on the market to cover their own shortfalls. Each balancing authority area must demonstrate it has sufficient supply to meet its load and uncertainty requirements, and they must do that independently. It's intended to promote fairness and reliability by requiring each participant to be resource efficient, so the ISO maintains equitable market participation and avoids reliability risks that could arise from one area depending too much on the others. It also supports market efficiency because a successful RSE helps ensure that the energy transfers between the balancing authority areas are based on economic optimization rather than emergency support, which we know can be a lot more expensive, and this helps to improve overall market efficiency. So in the day ahead, it's assessing the ISO balancing authority area, as well as each one of the extended day ahead market balancing authority areas. In the real-time RSE, that's looking at each Western energy imbalance market. So even when we've had this in WEIM, we didn't have it technically for the day ahead, because the ISO used the day ahead almost as our resource sufficiency evaluation, making sure that we had that sufficiency before we went into real time. And so we're just making it, more robust in with the day ahead, making a more official process. Excuse me. So basically, the RSE, it's just a reliability check. This is a set of tests. It ensures it's been designed to make sure, again, that each one of the BAs has sufficient supply and reserves that can meet its own forecasted demand. And each balancing authority area's offered supply, it's going to be, like I mentioned, it's evaluated against its demand. It's going to look at the imbalance reserve requirements. It's going to look at ancillary service requirements over the 24-hour intervals of the day ahead market. Now, it's going to look at those, but you're not going to be bidding AS into the day-ahead market, but you will be able to self-schedule your own internal AS. So a couple more notes about this. These tests happen continuously between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the day ahead. It's part of the pre-market coordination, and the final results are binding at 10 a.m. prior to the market closing. So first, the RFC is going to assess whether there are sufficient energy bids or self-schedule bids to meet the EDAM entity's forecasted load needs. If there is sufficiency, the entity passes. If there's insufficiency, the market is going to look at the overall capacity in that area. And then there's a process of how it's going to be looking out. Secondly, the RSC is going to look at ancillary service requirements. It's going to make sure that the BA has sufficient contingency reserve capacity available. And then finally, it's going to be looking at the imbalance reserve that ensures EDAM entity has sufficient bidding capacity to meet those fluctuations throughout the day, or the difference between your average and moving load, as well as some uncertainty between the day ahead and real time. So this is kind of like the real-time flex ramp sufficiency test, except in EDAM, the entity can bid specific values of both imbalance reserve up and imbalance reserve down. Whereas in the WEIM, the FRP, flex ramp product value, it's going to be determined by the market based on the energy bids. So a little bit of a difference there. Different than the current WEM RSC, the day-ahead resource sufficiency evaluation examines a full 24-hour time horizon to test whether entities have sufficient supply to meet the next day obligations. So again, excuse me, in the WEIM RSC, it's looking at each hour, and you've got to have that passed by T-minus 40 before the next operating hour, where this here in the day ahead, again, looking over that full 24-hour period. So this here provides a picture of the possible outcomes of the day-ahead RSC as it flows into real time. So you can take a look at this, like if you started over here on the right hand or left hand side, my other left, the EDAM up pool, you can see that all the entities, the balancing authority areas, all start together. And this is going to ensure that you know, then it's going to make a choice, it's going to do the optimizations. By 10 a.m., it's going to let you know if you've passed or failed. Pardon me. Excuse me. So if we look here at this path, we start with an initial assumption that all 8 of the EDAM BAAs are participating. So the happy path would be that, you know, we go to the tag and resupply process at T-minus 5 hours, so 5 hours before the operating hour. And if everything is good, yes, they passed, they would go into the next path, which would be, you know, into the RTM RC test. And, you know, again, the happy path would be, you know, is there any flex up that's needed? If there's a fail, you're going to go into AET. We'll talk about that here in a moment. If you pass, that would be the ultimate. You're going in and you're passing with the entire group collectively for this assessment. So if the group passes, they're going to join the broader WEIM footprint for the RTPD, which is the 15-minute market, the real-time pre-dispatch, and the RTD operations, the real-time or 5-minute operations. So kind of showed you what the happy path was, but what about the failures? So for handling failures, we have this tag and resupply or flex up as well. That can be ways to try and be assessed individually and move forward. So if one or more of the balancing authority areas, let's say A and B, failed in this area, they are going to be assessed individually, and they're going to see, do they need the flex up? If they didn't pass, they move there. If they did the flex ramp up, flex ramp sufficiency test, and they passed that, they would move on to this larger group within the WEIM. If they were to fail that test and fail to flex up, then they would be assessed for AET, or assistance energy transfer. If like I said, we're going to talk about that in a moment, but if they are bid into that, or if they've opted in for that, not bid in, but opted in, then they have that kind of hedge, that protection, and then they can move back into possibly into a group, or they're kind of protected from that, from meeting those needs. If they are not part of AET, they go into the solo FRP procurement, and the energy transfer is locked. So just like with the real-time resource sufficiency evaluation, if you don't pass for a particular interval, your energy transfers are going to be locked at the last value, last passing value. So this all ends up having, from a standpoint of, it all ends up working out into the RSE. So there are surcharges that could be applied to for resource efficiency evaluation. So what is the RSE surcharge? It is the surcharge that applies when a balancing authority area fails the day-ahead RSE test. This test checks if the balancing authority area has enough resources to meet its obligations before the market runs. So if they don't, they're going to pay that surcharge. And then who does it apply to? To both the ISO BAA and the EDAM BAA. So whoever doesn't pass and is up for that surcharge, if any of these areas fail the sufficiency test, they are subject to penalties. So how are those calculated? There are 3 tiers of surcharges. They're based on 2 different things. So the size of the failure, how many megawatts short, and then the relevant price. And that's either going to be the LMP or the trading hub price. And basically, the bigger the shortfall and the higher the price, the bigger the penalty. So how does this settlement work, the RSE settlement? So RSE charge is based on failed tests. So if you pass the test, and again, nothing is being committed at this point. It's just, again, to make sure that you're passing the sufficiency test, that you're going in whole, not leaning on the market, on your neighbors. So the RSE charge is based on failed tests, sub-allocated to the meter demand. So once you get to the BAA on surcharge and allocation, it's going to be based on ratio. So the ISO sub-allocation of the revenue, the ISO BAA is going to sub-allocate the surcharge to its participants based on meter demand. And those EDAM BAAs will allocate their shares to their entities. So how does the RSE settlement work? So this is where the net transfer comes in. For EDAM BAAs, the surcharge revenue is distributed to those BAAs that passed the day-ahead RSE, and that is going to be based on their net transfer system resource, the TSR, export ratio. So ISO is a BAA in this statement. This is going to be allocated to those who pass the test. So in the correct direction versus down. So the ISO will be able to sub-allocate the surcharge revenue to its participants, and it's going to be based on meter demand minus the balanced ETC TOR, which is the existing transmission contracts and transmission ownership rights. And then the EDAM BAAs are going to allocate their share to their entities. The charge codes that are associated, they're new charge codes. 8080, which is the RSC surcharge settlement, and then 8088, which is the RSC surcharge allocation. So just to differentiate between the two, 8080 is the surcharge, which is basically the failure charge. It applies. So 8080 is the penalty for failing. 8088 is the reward for passing, and that's directly to the BAA that failed the test. And the 8088, that's again the surcharge allocation. Its credit is distributed to BAAs that pass the test, and that is going to be based on their export ratio. So an example here, let's say that BAA 1 fails by 50 megawatts and it's less than 10% of the requirement. There is no settlement. So if greater than a de minimis deficiency quantity tier 2 applies at 100 megawatts times $50 per megawatt times 1.25, that's 6,250. If greater than a de minimis deficiency quantity tier 3 applies at 100 megawatts times 50 megawatts times 2, that's $10,000. That surcharge is going to go into a pool, and then the ISO is going to allocate that back out to the participants. That's going to be based on the metered demand minus that ETC TOR. Meanwhile, the BAAs that passed get a share of that pool through charge code 8088, and that's going to be based on their TSR export ratio for the upward and TSR import ratio for the downward. There are the tiers. So tier 1 is failed by less than 10%. We forgive the surcharge. If there's a tier 1 failure that's ineligible to receive allocations in 8088, it's not going to charge, but they're not going to pay. So they do get charged a percentage of the IR, the imbalance reserve requirement, which is less than 10%, less than 50%. And we've got a 1.2 multiplier tier 2 for upward failures and a 2.0 multiplier for tier 3. And here's somebody, a question or? All right.
I'm not sure. I think that was feedback.
Okay. All right. So that's for the RSC, but earlier I mentioned the assistance energy transfer, and you might be like, what is that? Currently, it's a WEIM mechanism. It provides reliability benefits to BAAs that may be short on their energy capacity or operational flexibility, and it allows the grid operator to import or export electricity between the regions during emergencies, during shortages, and that's in order to help maintain system reliability and balance by providing any kind of access to surplus energy from the other participants in the WEIM. So this access is relevant when a BAA fails its RSC test for upward capacity or flexible ability needs. So let's break that down. Are EDAM BAAs gross imports sufficiently tagged? That's one of the things that it's being looked at during each run. The system's going to check whether each EDAM, whether their gross imports are sufficiently tagged. If a BAA is found to be under tagged, a bid reliability resupply test that's going to be triggered at T-5 hours before the operating hour. This test is going to ensure that the BAA has incremental energy bids that are above its day-ahead market schedule and that they have enough imbalance reserves or reliability capacity awards to cover that shortfall. So these results are then going to feed into the real-time market RSE that we just talked about, and it's going to influence whether the balancing authority area can remain in the WEIM RSE pool and continue benefiting from the shared uncertainty and reserve diversity. So are they going to go into it alone, or are they going to go into it as a group? So there is a little bit of a difference between assistance energy transfer in WEM versus EDAM. So in EDAM, the AET is based on the day-ahead schedule, which is unlike the WEIM, which is going to use the base schedules. So AET allows the BAAs to share ramping capability, and that's across the balancing authority area boundaries. The balancing authority area that elects to have AET, that can be grouped together. So it's, again, that extra hedge. They can exchange energy with other BAAs that have opted into AETs. The BAAs that choose not to elect AET can only exchange energy within their own group, and they cannot interact with the AET BAAs. So those that are already protected, that are part of the AET, they kind of get grouped together. And a BAA that fails the tagging and resupply and fails flex test must operate independently. So again, we were just looking at this here. And so that's kind of, this year when we're looking at, are they in AET? So we're kind of looking at all that. Did they pass the tag and resupply? Did they pass the flex ramp sufficiency evaluation? And if they're in a group, they can work together. If they are not in a group, then they're going it alone. So how many BAAs are in WEIM? Oh, shoot, I think it's 21 or 22, and we have 2 that are going to be onboarding here in about a week after EDAM goes live. So I wish I knew that number right off the top of my head, but we're a little over 20 right now, and we have Black Hills Energy, and we have Power Watch that are going to be joining here in mid-May. And we do have a map of all the different entities in their areas, their balancing authority areas that they represent on our Western Energy Markets website. And so you can see a picture there. So, thanks, great question. All right, so the charge codes that are associated with the energy transfer, you've got the surcharge that applies to all the BAAs that elect to opt in. So the financial implications are BAAs that receive the energy assistance energy transfer. When they fail their RSE, they are subject to an ex post surcharge. The surcharge is in addition to the LMP cleared in the market for the transferred energy. The settlements are calculated at the real-time AET surcharge for insufficient WEIM BAAs and EDAM BAA RSE upward AET pools. Settlements are distribute AET surcharges proportional to a BAA's net import transfer beyond the day-ahead market or base net transfer in the AET insufficient pool. So for the RTM AET, the settlement, there are the pool definitions. The EDAM upward pool is a pool that's comprised of the EDAM entity BAAs that satisfy that upward component of the EDAM RSE in each hour of the EDAM, and together with each EDAM BAA that has cured its upward failure in the EDAM RSE through the ISM and incurred the EDAM RSE upward failure surcharge. from a downward pool that's comprised of the EDAM BAAs that satisfy the downward components of the EDAM RSC in each hour of the day ahead market, together with each EDAM BAA that has cured its downward failure of the EDAM RSC through the IFM and incurred EDAM RSC downward failure surcharge. So charge code 6476 is the real-time assistance energy transfer surcharge. 6479 is the real-time energy transfer allocation. They both apply to all the BAAs. They're allocated to the BAAs. The 6476 is assessed to the BAAs that opt in and fail. And then the real-time assistance energy transfer allocation is going to be allocated to the balancing authority areas that pass the RC test pro rata to net exporters beyond transfer. And then the sub-allocation, as you can see here, the ISO, the surcharges are sub-allocated to the measured demand, less valid balanced ETC or TOR schedules. And the allocation, the ISO is going to sub-allocate to FCs providing incremental net real-time imbalance energy, as you can see here. All right, so AET is a piece of, it does have that relationship with RSC, whether or not entities have opted in. So, all right, perfect, Bo. Thanks for posting the Western Energy Markets link. Perfect. 28. Okay, George, or Manos. I saw George first. Manos, thank you very much. So we're up to 28. All right. So any questions on RSC before we, or AET before we move on? So a little bit about transfer revenue. These transfer revenue, that refers to the financial compensation that is given to transmission right holders when their transmission capacity is used to move energy between the balancing authority areas. So it's going to be calculated as the difference between the energy component of the LMP between the source and sink, and it's shared between the adjacent areas that are involved in the transfer. So with the EDAM and the WEIM, they're both based on the concept of transfers between the balancing authority areas in the market footprint. So any movement of this energy between the EDAM to EDAM is going to be categorized into 4 different groups. And I'm going to specify those in a moment. And you got to hear about those yesterday with Bo and in other training classes that we've done. But each BAA is kept in balance separately with a power balance constraint. And that is going to allow for an optimal net transfer that is either positive for export or negative for import. So a power balance constraint is a crucial concept in energy markets, especially when managing these transfers of energy between the balancing authority areas. So in essence, the power balance constraint makes sure that the total generation of electricity matches the total demand plus any losses within a given area. This balance is vital for maintaining the stability and reliability of the power grid. And if the supply exceeds the demand, it can lead to overfrequency issues. If the demand exceeds the supply, it can cause underfrequency, and that can potentially lead to blackouts. So it's real important that we make sure that we've maintained that balance. So for those of you that are in WEIM, you've probably heard the term ETSRs, so Energy Transfer System Resources. In EDAM, they're transfer system resources because they're a little bit different in that they include both energy and capacity, where the WEIM ETSRs were energy only. I believe Bo pointed that out too yesterday. And Steve, great question. For the BAAs, you still need to opt into AET to actively participate. Yep. Or actively opt in to participate. Yep. All right, so there's 4 different types of transfer system resources, and Bo took you through those if you were in the class yesterday. And so I'm not going to go into those in a lot of depth because there are some great resources out there. The training that he did yesterday, we did recently just do, and we've got training materials that are out there. We recently did a cyber training where we talked a little bit more into the bidding of the transfer system resources. But just kind of to recap those, type 1 and 2, those are for EDAM SCs. You might want to call those the transmission customers. Earlier in the presentation, I referred to them as transmission customer SCs. And so that's, you can refer to those there. Type 1 are the bilateral energy transactions between EDAM SCs, which are the transmission customers that are exercising physical and financial transmission rights on each side of the transfer. Type 2 are the capacity from the EDAM SCs, which are the transmission customers that release their transfer rights on each side of the transfer location. For type 3 and 4, type 3 are resource sufficiency evaluation, the RSC eligible transfer capacity, and it's released by an EDAM entity. This capacity can be used toward the RSC. But then the type 4 is a non-RSC eligible transfer capacity that's released by an EDAM entity. So again, this capacity cannot be used toward the resource sufficiency evaluation. For the transfer revenue allocation in EDAM, except for type 2, the transfer capacity releases occurring before 9 a.m. The transfer revenue is generally split evenly between the EDAM entities on each side of the transfer. And there are custom revenue splits. If there is a different revenue sharing ratio that's specified in master file, that's going to be based on a BAA pair, intertie, and direction, and that ratio is going to override the default even split. For revenue distribution of EDAM SCs, each EDAM entity is responsible for distributing its share of the transfer revenue of its EDAM SCs in accordance with its open access transmission tariff, its OAT. So there are charge codes that are associated with transfer revenue, and they're listed here. They cover the imbalance reserve transfer revenue settlement, energy transfer revenue settlement, the RUC, residual unit commitment, reliability capacity transfer revenue settlement, and the real-time energy transfer revenue settlement. These will be calculated, the transfer revenue at each transfer location, and the distribution of transfer revenue to associated balancing authority areas. Again, that default ratio is 50-50. It can be sub-allocated of TSR type 2 transfers is allocated to the SC that released the schedule, and for the BAA, EDAM BAAs, transfer revenue is allocated to the entity. For the ISO BAA, transfer revenue is sub-allocated pro rata to measured demand less the ETC TOR direction allocation. No pay applies for the IR and the RC transfer revenue, and transfer revenue less congestion. So those are the basic overall calculations of the transfer revenue. So any questions before we move on to the basics of the EDAM timing and payment calendar? All right, so those are just some of the charge codes that of the new products and some of the biggest changes that we have. There's still quite a few other changes. When we post this presentation, we will you'll be able to see different sections that kind of talk about different at a higher level, some of the different charge codes and the groupings, such as grid management charge, GHG. I know that was a big question for yesterday, and we are working on updating our GHG training, including settlements training. So stay tuned. We will have more information about that. We're a little bit still sparse on that information, but we will create more training. So
Hey, Heidi,
yeah,
we got
can I go
a
back?
question, a
Yeah,
request to go
yes. So
back. Mike,
which
if you want to come off mute and maybe ask your questions.
slide were you looking for?
Hi, this is Mike McGuffin from CES. I'm not sure exactly what slide, but it was the IR deployment slides where we were talking about the day ahead IR product and the interaction with the FRP. And I'm sorry,
Oh,
it took me
okay.
a little to marinate on this.
In this area?
Yeah, so the question is, if you sold IR capacity on a resource in the day ahead market, and that capacity, it sounded like if that capacity was for whatever reason unavailable, you were buying back at the FRP price. And I believe that's correct. I've seen that in the documentation. So I just wanted to confirm.
I believe that's true. Manoj, would you be able to answer that question? Just so I don't lead him wrong.
Yeah, for that no pay, right? Because if that capacity is not there in real time, it will come as a no pay. That will be, I think it's take the max of day ahead or FRP price. I think it's yeah, it's a max of IR or FRU price, the last one, right?
Okay, so this is different. Like AS no pay, you're not necessarily penalized because you're buying back at the price that you sold for in the no pay calculation. So this is unique in ISO settlement in that you're selling one product and then exposed to an entirely different product in the real-time market that's based on a different procurement cycle, different inputs. And this was the intention of the no pay settlement, was to expose, because you are exposed to a completely different calculation.
Yeah, I think because if you procure something in real time, there you may expose to real time price, right? I think that's the reason. I don't know the main reason, but I think because the day ahead is not available in real time, you need to procure that at the higher price, right? So that
But
is the
they're
reason.
fundamentally different products. I mean, I get that they're similar, they're both ramping, but they're different. So okay, sounds like that is the case. I read that right. And then the other question I had was you mentioned deployment. So if the unit was actually dispatched for energy in an hour in which it sold capacity, did I hear right that you were saying that the capacity payment was also, in that case, was also bought back at the FRP price?
Which scenario? Sorry, can you repeat that?
So I thought I heard if you sell capacity, IR capacity in the day ahead market, and it's actually dispatched for energy in the real time market, that there was some interaction with the FRP. My understanding is that if you sell capacity, if you sell IR capacity in the day ahead and it's actually dispatched for energy in real time, you keep the capacity payment. And I guess that's the question.
Yeah, if it is dispatched above, we will keep it. But if it is not available, we take it back, right? You take it back, right?
Okay, so that's maybe that's what I misunderstood was if it's dispatched and unavailable, then there's an FRP priced buyback. But if the capacity is simply deployed in real time, you're keeping the capacity payment and whatever energy settlement that is involved. Right. There's no rescission of the day ahead IR capacity payment to the if the underlying capacity is dispatched in real time.
Yeah, Yeah, that there is no precision in that case. Yes.
Okay, good. I think I just misunderstood earlier. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Great question. Thanks, Manoj. Right. Any other questions? All right. Do this real quick. Get us back to where we're at. Move forward here just a minute. Okay. All right, so for the EDAM timing and payment calendar, this is more of the general information, but for a lot of you, you might be brand new to dealing with our settlements, timelines and systems. And so just wanted to refresh you on this so that you know where all of these charge codes are going to apply, when you're going to be needing to, when you're going to expect to see your settlement statements, when you're going to be expected to pay your invoices. So we're going to show the settlements timeline. So the timelines and adherence to dates, it's critical for settling of the markets. And each entity that's going to have any kind of market interaction, they're going to receive a settlement statement. So even if you put in one bid, you're going to receive a settlement statement because there are charge codes associated, such as the grid management charge for bid segment fee. So anytime you're participating in the markets using any kind of ISO services, there's going to be settlement statements. But there is a lot of data that is being checked. Earlier, when we looked at the charge code configuration guide, you saw all of the different attributes, the different formulas. All of those have association with the awards that were received. Did the energy flow? Did it not? You know, there's so much complication in all of the different information. The predecessor charge codes, the successor charge codes, all of the different impacts that are there. So there's a lot of checking that needs to be done and verified. So there are a series of settlement statements that come out rather than just one. So there are initial settlement statements, they come out. And so just I'll go through our timeline. We've kind of made adjustments over time. When I first got here, I don't think that there was even a time limit, and then we went to 36 months, and then we ended up with 24 month, which is what we're at right now. So we made a couple years back, we made some adjustments. So now when you have a trade date, you get that award, you have the trade date, we do price corrections. We used to have estimated settlement quality meter data and versus actual meter settlement quality meter data, because all of the data needs to be broken down into the system into settlement quality meter data, or SQMD. So we do price corrections up front to try and eliminate as much of the error, to avoid as much of the disputes and the back and forth, the reruns, et cetera. So on 3 business days, and again at 5 business days after the trade date, we run price corrections. Then there's meter data submission time. So there is a T+7B, and then again at T+52B. So that's when the submission is going in by the entities, or it can be pulled by the ISO. If it's an ISO metered entity, an ISO ME, we'll pull it on your behalf. It's a service that we provide, or if you're providing your own, you need to provide that settlement quality meter data. You will not see a first statement for that trade date until 9 business days after the trade date. So by then, we've got more data that's come in. We've done price corrections, we've got meter data that we can validate against, and then we roll out the first statement that you will see for that trade date 9 business days after. You have up until T plus 52B in order to submit your meter data, and that needs to be accurate. It needs to be complete at that point. If it goes beyond, there could be rules of conduct that is brought in. Based on that meter data submission, any kind of corrections and everything, you're going to be looking at all those prices, and then the next settlement statement that comes out for that trade date will be 70 business days after that trade date. Those are the guaranteed settlement statements that come out, but we do have optional settlement statements that may come out. Maybe there's some kind of a change. Maybe there was some kind of an incremental difference. Maybe there was a dispute. And so there's optional settlement statements that come out at 11 months after the trade date, 21 months after the trade date, and then the last one, which is at 24 months after the trade date. After that, it's non-disputable. Now, when I mentioned disputes, everything that you see here that has an asterisk next to it, there are disputes that are accepted. And when it says until T plus 22 business days after the published statement, so after the T plus 9B, you have up to 22 days after that, settlement statement to put in a dispute. And you would do that through the city application that we provide. There is a disputes. It's used for inquiries, but it's also used for disputes. You would have 22 business days after you receive your T plus 70B settlement statement, after your 22 days after your 11, 22 days after your 21st. But again, non-disputable after that. If it's something that's larger, it would go into another process to be looked at, maybe some kind of mediation or. But those are the dates that we're looking at. Yes.
Sorry, just had a question in the chat, but it just disappeared. It was in regards to the last comment you just made about the asterisks.
Oh, so. Yep.
Thank you. That the question was answered, so I just appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, so you have those opportunities to dispute, but there's a time limit after each one, and that's up to 22 business days. So it can be very complicated to be tracking those. So we do have a payment calendar. It is available on our settlements page on our website. And if you're looking at this, it is a huge spreadsheet, and it can also get complicated. This is just like the charge code matrix that I had before. This is a scaled down version just to kind of show some of the key columns that are in here. But they will be published and updated for different times. You could say I used an old screenshot from 2025, but there's a new one that's out there for 2026. Every once in a while, we'll have some kind of a change, and if there is a change mid-schedule, you would get a notice in the daily briefing if we make a change. So I did not create a link for that, but if you're not signed up for the daily briefing, I would highly recommend going to subscriptions on the ISO website. It's at the bottom of the page, and sign up to get daily briefings, because if there are any kind of price corrections, if there's maybe an updated payment calendar or different kind of settlement notifications, as well as training notifications and everything else, you will get an email once a day, and any kind of notices that are put out, you'll receive those, but it can give you very critical settlement information. So I highly recommend that you sign up to receive that. So let's walk through this kind of small, but take a look at that. I think we'll put a link to it in the chat. But invoices are published weekly on Wednesdays. So we mentioned when you get the settlement statements, but then there's invoices. So once you get an invoice, that's going to let you know if you're going to have to pay or if you're going to be paid. So that's a payment advice. But those are invoices. Those are published weekly on Wednesdays. So if we look at this example here, on the 6th of January, it's a Wednesday, you would receive that invoice. Now, what are you going to see on that invoice? There's another column over here that says publish weekly invoices, and that's going to let you know the timelines that are going to be those trade dates. When we just looked at the timeline calendar, this is going to let you know what you're going to be expecting to see on that invoice. So for this particular example, you're going to see the T+9B initial, and so that first settlement statement that comes out at T+9B, you would see that for the dates, and the information that's inside of that is 12/19 to 12/25. You're going to also see the recalc. So the T+70B, that next settlement statement that you would see, and that's going to be for dates in September. But then you would also see the T+11 month recalc for those particular dates, and it's going to give you that date range that's there for what you're still looking at settling. So it's going to show you all of those different timelines that we saw in the last slide. You're going to see those types of information. It's going to let you know which ones you're going to be actually seeing. So then if you move down, like I mentioned, the invoices come out and let you know what you're going to be paid or what you're going to have to pay on Wednesday, but you need to go back and make sure that that payment is going to be in. So if it's an invoice and you need to pay, that is due by 10 a.m., no later than 10 a.m. And this is Pacific prevailing time. So California time, it needs to be in by 10 o'clock. You will start getting emails and phone calls if it's not in, getting kind of closer to 10 o'clock. And the reason we need that money to be paid in by that following Tuesday is because we need to take that money, process it, turn it around, and pay out by 2 p.m. to those that receive the payment advice saying that this is what you're going to be paid. So it's real critical that you get your payments in on time, so that we can turn that back around and pay. So you want, if you're going to be the one that's going to be getting the money, you want people to be paying on time so that you can get your money in time. So that's the process for each day. And there is that other column, the weekly invoice that's due by 10 o'clock. This is going to show you which trade dates are being processed. So again, the ones that you saw that you were, that you were going to be paid for or being paid or paying for, that's going to be shown here on, this is what you're going to be reconciling on the weekly invoice day. So this is kind of an example of how to read it. It can be a little complicated, but once you get used to it, it's reading across. There's other columns that are in there, but that's kind of a high level of how to read the payment calendar. All right. Thank you for putting the daily briefing in there, the subscriptions. Thank you very much, Bo. That's great. So that's it for the payment calendar. Where can you find the settlement statements that you're receiving, and where also can you put in the meter data that is going to be fed in? So the market results interface, the settlements, it's the MRIS tool. It's used for both, even though the settlements is in the title, it's used for both settlements and for meter. And it's used to retrieve, submit, validate, and publish both settlements and meter data. And what you can see when you're in the tool is going to be dependent upon what your user access administrator has provisioned you to do. And it's going to be based on your role as to what kind of information you can see where you can get to. So just kind of a quick breakdown. If we're looking at the settlement side of this, so MRIS settlements, which sounds redundant, settlement, but there are a couple of key pieces of a couple key areas that you can put information into to help you sort better. So there's a search parameters. So you would pick the trade dates that you're looking for in order to find your particular settlement statement. And it could be looking at the settlement statement, bill determinants, daily recalc, initial market approved. So there are different documents that you're going to be able to look for. So there are search parameters. The search results are here in the body of this for the different documents that you can download. There is a toolbar, and in this toolbar, that's going to allow you to further sort, filter, page through the different results. And then there's the download buttons. So that's going to allow you to download the statements in the different file formats. So when you check the format you need, the appropriate download button for that selected format appears. So it could be XML, CSV, or PDF. So that's for settlement statements where you can go find those. Some of the other piece of information that you can find regarding settlements data, we talked about bill determinants earlier. MRIS, you can find these bill determinants. Those are files that contain the data elements representing information that is related to market activity. And there are two types, the business associate and ISO. The settlement statement, so the charges, payments for market and transmission related activities between the scheduling coordinators and the ISO for a specific period of time. The invoices, so again, there's a difference between the settlement statement that show the range of days, and then the invoice is what you need to be paying or what you're going to expect to be paid. And those show the net result of the weekly settlement statement activity. So the invoice, again, going to show you if you're going to pay, going to be paid, and these will be available according to the payment calendar. So we just looked at the payment calendar. That's going to let you know when you can go into MRIS and pull that information. The configuration output files, those are posted when a change in configuration are made during the deployment of settlement releases, and contain the settlement configuration rules in the form of XML. So they're available via the configuration output files type dropdown, but they're only available in MRIS for a limited time, but they are always downloadable on the ISO website under the settlements page. You go back and find those there. If you're using MRIS for meter data, there are two tabs. There's the meter data and batch status screens. So dependent on what you're able to do, are you a read only, are you a read write? That's going to depend on which one of these icons up here you're going to see, which one of the tabs, I should say. And you have following options in here. You've got the search parameters. So again, looking for particular dates. You've got the toolbar to help sort and go through the results, just like on the settlement side. But then you also have versioning. And so in the versioning, you can set up your user filters. That's going to show your settlement quality meter data, your SQMD versioning. And that's going to allow you to access the last two versions of your data that have been uploaded. So those will be the only two versions that are available in MRIS. And in addition, you can view the data that was used in your current settlement statement. So again, depending on what your role is, it's going to depend on what you can see in MRIS. But we do have a CBT that is available. So if you have been provisioned access to the market participant portal, and if you have been access to MRIS, you can go into the MPP, the market participant portal, and you can go to the training. You don't have to be provisioned to the MRIS to take the training, but there is a training CBT that walks you through that application, and then you can also access MRIS through the market participant portal. And again, it depends on your provisioning. If your user access administrator has provisioned you access to this tool.
Heidi, we have a question from Portland General from Ryan. There's a little bit of details in the chat, and it's requesting a kind of a walkthrough the approach to using UIE for Intel Tier 1 allocation for RC and IR.
That was more complicated than I am would be able to give you. So Manoj, would that be something that you would be able to tackle here, or is this something that we would maybe need to take back and do a better write-up on? Manoj, still on?
Yeah, I'm looking into it. I'm reading it.
A great question.
Yeah, I don't think I can answer it right now. Maybe we'll take this question and get back to you, Ryan.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that, Ryan. That will help, and we'll take that back. Like you said, we'll either write it up and maybe we'll make sure that we add it to the Q&A that we post, but then maybe follow up in another meeting with it. So yeah, great. Thank you. So getting close on time. So a couple of ways that you can still get involved for the EDAM. There are some EDAM settlement connections. How can you prepare for go live and continuing on? Paul asked earlier, it's like, hey, are we going to start to see this being effective? There's going to still be continuing changes. So how can you prepare whether you're going to be going live and affected, May 1st, or if it's going to be something that's going to be touching you in the future? So there's a couple different ways. Participate in forums and meetings, get to know the documents, participate in market simulation, and review the training materials and participate in future classes. So let's walk those through. Earlier, we saw this this page here. So we gave a link to the ISO calendar. You can find these meetings. These are all public meetings. You can go on the ISO calendar, find those, download those to your calendar, and please participate. And the more active you are in asking the question, the better it gets somebody thinking about it, and you can affect change. The release planning page, we referred to that. We went through a lot of documents early on, and these are where you can go and find a lot of those documents that are very, very helpful prior to go live. You can scroll down, it will give you the different documents. And it's not just for EDAM and DAME. There's also other, there's still a lot of other things that are going on for the for other projects as well. Sorry, I saw your note, David, and I believe they are going to be the GRDT. I'm trying to remember because I asked this question yesterday, and I don't want to steer you wrong, but definitely for 4:30 it will be correct. But I'm trying to remember if they said it's going to be now or not. But I'll make sure that I get back to you with that question, because we did have that question yesterday, and I'm sorry, I'm totally blanking on the answer of when that's going to be available. But definitely by 4:30, I know that for sure. Yeah, and that what I'm questioning is, for some reason I thought that it was already updated, and that's why I was kind of like, oh, I want to check on that. And so we'll let you know, when it's available, and then downloading would be fine. But if you're looking for the data to go in there, I think that they're kind of putting a hold until 4:30 I know for bids for sure, but I'm not sure about the GRDT. But I will follow up on that and get back to you. And that will be in the Q&A as well for everybody. All right, a couple of documents that are helpful. The market simulation plan for spring 2026 release. Maybe you're not even participating, but if you go into the plan, you kind of get an idea of what's happening. So it's got a lot of good information in there of what this rollout is looking like. And there's also market simulation structured scenarios. So there's two that are out there. There's one for the DAME and then there's one for EDAM as well. And so Bo has put those in the chat. But what's nice about those is if you go into those and scroll down, you can see what these different scenarios of an imbalance reserve bid, and then it will go, if you scroll down, it will show you the charge codes that are associated that you're going to want to go test and see that they come out into your system. But you can start to see what the relationship is between the charge codes and the different market activities. So those are available to go check out. Those are on the release planning page. You can find helpful training resources on the ISO Training Center. So not only can you find the EDAM training materials, we've got CBTs, we've got training modules, and we are just now, because things are wrapping up, things are still being, being finessed until the very end. And then Bo and I are going to be going through all of our materials, updating those with the most current information, and then looking to see what else we can develop. Like I mentioned the GHG earlier, we do have a CBT about the regulation obligations, but we've found that there are so many more deep questions that are yet to be answered. And so that's one of my priorities, is working on the GHG materials and getting those out. So keep an eye on the training center, and we will be producing more information. And you can see when we have classes through the daily briefing. If you don't see a training you need, please submit a city ticket. If you do not have access to city, maybe you're not a scheduling coordinator, but you have a scheduling coordinator, you can send that request to your scheduling coordinator and ask that they submit a request on your behalf. And then we will take that back. We will do a needs analysis and determine what kind of training we can roll out, whether it be a document, a CBT, an actual training course. We're in a big push to really grow our group and our outreach with training. So a lot more to come in the next 2 years from a training standpoint. So please keep your eye on this site. If you do have EDAM or DAME market simulation inquiries, if you don't have access to city, you can use the contact us form. That's on our ISO website. And we ask, if they're general inquiries, provide detailed questions, relevant screenshots, if it's user interface inquiries, policy inquiries, API inquiries, different kinds of questions. And so you can go and take a look at those. But the big key is, if you do put in a city ticket for training, for anything else, be as specific as possible. For instance, if you're questioning a particular settlement, take a screenshot of what you're looking at, point to where you found this information. If it's about bidding, take a screenshot of the timestamp so that our subject matter experts and our developers can go back and look at that time and get a question or an answer back to your question as soon as possible. I saw maybe there was a note about UAA issues, so we're happy to talk to you about that after, David, if you wanted to hang on. We can kind of see if we can troubleshoot your issue, see what the reason is there. Please tell us how, oh, not necessarily, okay. Please tell us how we did. So Bo is going to put in a link to our course survey. Please fill it out. It's the only way that we're going to get better. It will help us improve the future training. It will, it will kind of give us an idea of, what kind of topics you're looking for. We can kind of assess it based on the chatter, maybe city tickets, but let us know what you're looking for, what kind of level you're looking for. We are going to be moving forward over this next couple of years to really go from this kind of flood of information to hands-on, more task-based information, like work through it, not just information, but actual, practice. So that's our goal, is to get there. So let us know what means something to you, and we can continue to improve that. So that'll see if there are any last questions before we wrap up for the day. And there may be other questions, and so if we didn't get to your question today, what we will do is we will follow up, and I will be getting an answer to all the questions. I'll be collecting what Bo has been collecting from our subject matter experts, and we will put that into a Q&A guide, and it will be all posted on our ISO Training Center under the Western Energy Markets tab. And we also, that's one of the reasons why we had you register for this class, is so that we have your email addresses so that we can send this out to you as well to let you know when this material is available, so you don't have to wait or go searching for it. So if you have any questions on this training, please feel free to send us the note to customer readiness at CAISO.com, or you can submit a city ticket or use the contact us. So again, that presentation will be posted within 3 days. I will try to get to it as soon as possible, and I will definitely get the presentation and the recording posted probably sooner than the Q&A, but within 3 business days that will be posted. So, all right. So for this EDAM, Manoj, real quick, I see that will EDAM affect CRR settlement for this year? I don't believe it will, but I'm not sure. Do you know on that one?
And not this year. I think it's a future thing, but
Yeah.
that yeah, it's not currently. Yes.
Yeah, so I don't think it's an issue for this year, but that's one of the questions I'll follow up on to see what that timeline is looking for the CRR settlements for the allocations. I know that they're still having meetings about that, so I'll follow up on that one for you. All right. Well, thank you guys all very much for being here today. Really appreciate your time and your questions. Manoj, thank you very much for being here and answering questions. Bo, thank you for being a great producer. And for everybody else, I hope you have a wonderful day. We look forward to seeing you in future trainings. Take care.